She saved the baby trapped in the elevator, never expecting to face the man who once held her heart. He didn't recognize the maid who vanished after tragedy. But fate did. What if the woman he's been searching for was just steps away and holding a secret that could change everything? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Clara Reyes adjusted the cart of towels, her fingers red from cleaning chemicals and winter wind that slipped through the revolving doors of the Zenith Hotel. The lobby shimmered with marble floors and a chandelier that looked like frozen rain. Clara kept her eyes low, blending into the background like she always had. It was safer that way, especially in a place where everyone wore perfume that cost more than her rent. She moved quickly down the hall, her mind already jumping ahead to her night shift cleaning the penthouse suites. But as she rounded the corner near elevator bank B, a piercing scream shattered the hum of jazz music in the lobby. "There's a baby in there," someone shouted. Clara's cart slammed to a halt. Guests crowded around the sealed elevator, murmuring, panicking. The lights above the doors blinked red. A woman near the panel was shaking, trying to press buttons that weren't responding. From inside came the thin, terrified wail of a baby. Not just a whimper, a scream full of fear. Clara didn't think. She handed her cart off to a nearby bellhop and pushed through the group. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady. "Let me through." A maintenance man in a navy jumpsuit was kneeling near the panel, sweating. "We called the fire department, but it could take 10 minutes, he muttered. "Doors are jammed." 10 minutes was too long. Clara knelt beside him. "Can you help me pry the doors just a little?" He stared at her. "You're a maid." "I'm also not going to let a baby scream in the dark while everyone stands around," she replied. Something in her voice, firm but kind, made the man nod. They wedged a long rod between the elevator doors, grunting. The crowd gasped as the doors creaked open, just enough for a small figure to be seen inside. Clara got down on her stomach. Tearingly, "You're not going in there," someone said behind her. She didn't answer. She crawled in. Inside the elevator, the emergency light cast an eerie glow. The baby sat in a stroller, tears streaking his tiny face. His cheeks were flushed, and his chest heaved with each panicked breath. Clara whispered, kneeling beside him. "Hi, sweetheart. You're okay. I'm here." Her voice was calm, warm. She reached into the stroller and gently unbuckled him, lifting him into her arms. The baby cried into her neck, but his body started to relax. Clara rocked slightly, humming an old Spanish lullaby her sister used to sing. The melody wrapped around them like a thread of comfort in the metal box. "We've got you," she whispered. "No more scary noises." The elevator jolted once, then stopped again. Outside, people were shouting instructions. Clara didn't care. All she saw was the little boy clinging to her like she was the only safe thing in the world. When the doors finally pulled open, fully, a rush of cold air hit her face. She stepped out slowly, baby still in her arms. The crowd had fallen silent. Hotel guests stood frozen in awe. A woman clutched her pearls. A businessman lowered his phone mid-video. Clara didn't notice any of it. All she saw was the man walking through the parting crowd, eyes locked on the child in her arms. Tall, dark suit, broad shoulders, blue-gray eyes sharpened by both power and something far older, pain. Clara's breath caught. Adrian Wolfe. The name hadn't passed her lips in years, but her heart still whispered it. She stood still as he approached. The baby stirred in her arms, his cries replaced by a soft whimper. "Max," Adrian breathed, rushing forward. "Is he all right?" Clara nodded. He was scared, but not hurt. Adrian carefully reached for the child, lifting him from her arms with practiced care. He held the boy close, whispering softly to him. Then he turned to her. "Thank you," he said, his voice formal. "Thank you for stepping in. That was brave and smart, and Clara kept her face neutral. The lights overhead flickered. She could smell his cologne, citrus and pine, the same kind he wore back then. He didn't recognize her. Of course he didn't. Years and pain had carved lines into her life. Her once soft curls were pinned up under her maid's cap. Her bright eyes had dimmed, her smile rarer now. Still, part of her had hoped. "You're welcome," she said quietly. Adrian nodded to the hotel manager, who was stammering apologies. "See to it she's commended," he ordered. And he turned back to Clara. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Clara. No last name. Not yet." He paused. "Clara." For a split second, his brow furrowed. Something flickered in his expression, recognition tugging at memory, but it passed like a shadow. Clara gave a tight smile. "I should get back to work." She stepped back. Adrian, focused on comforting Max, didn't stop her. Clara turned quickly, weaving through the lingering crowd, her legs trembling as she reached the service corridor. Once she rounded the corner, she pressed her back to the wall. Her hands shook, her throat burned. He hadn't seen her, not really, and maybe that was better. Her past had nearly destroyed him once. She couldn't afford to do it again. She took a deep breath, forcing the tears back down. Then she straightened her spine, smoothed her uniform, and walked back into the quiet maze of service hallways. The towels still needed to be delivered, the penthouse floors still had to be cleaned. And Adrian Wolfe, the boy she'd once planned to marry, was now a man with no idea she'd ever existed. But she remembered everything. The crash, the silence, the choice she made to disappear. And now, fate had brought him back. And not to love her, but to thank the maid who saved his nephew. And that, Clara told herself, would have to be enough. Clara turned the key in her apartment door, the old knob squeaking as she pushed it open. Her place was tiny, one room and a kitchen the size of a closet, but it was hers. After 10 hours on her feet, it welcomed her with quiet. She kicked off her worn sneakers, hung her uniform on the hook by the door, and crossed the room to a chipped wooden drawer. With gentle fingers, she pulled it open and reached for a small tin box tucked underneath folded t-shirts. Inside was a single photograph. 2 teenagers, barefoot in the grass, smiling into sunlight. Adrian's arm was wrapped around her shoulders, her long brown hair spilled across his chest, her cheeks round with laughter. He wore a crooked grin that she used to call troublemakers. They had been 17. She remembered the moment clearly. It was the afternoon before prom. He had kissed her forehead and promised they'd figure everything out, that they'd leave town, build a future, no matter what. That promise died a month later. The crash happened in late July. Clara's older sister had been driving, a deer, a curve too sharp. One breath, they were singing along to a cassette tape. The next, there was only smoke and screams. Her sister died instantly. Clara survived, with guilt so heavy it became a second skin. But the worst part wasn't the funeral. It was watching Adrian weep. His parents already disapproved of her family. After the accident, they made it clear, if he stayed with Clara, his future would vanish. Scholarships, opportunities, reputation. So Clara did the only thing she could to protect him. She disappeared. And goodbye. No letter, just vanished. Let him think she'd left because she stopped loving him, because that hurt less than dragging him down with her. She wiped at her eyes now, the photo trembling in her hands. "I thought I'd buried you," she whispered to the image. "And here you are." Across town, Adrian Wolfe stood in front of the massive window in his penthouse office, his tie loosened, brow furrowed. "You've been quiet all day," said Julian, his assistant and oldest friend, as he entered with a glass of scotch. Adrian turned. "That maid? Clara." No, Clara was her name. The woman from the elevator. She looked like... Julian blinked. "Clara Reyes?" Adrian nodded, half laughing, half shaking his head. "I know it's ridiculous. She vanished 10 years ago. I told myself she was gone." Julian exhaled. "You didn't just tell yourself. You buried her. I remember the way you looked that whole year." "I bared the memory, not the feeling," Adrian said quietly. It hit me today. Her eyes, Julian. Same eyes, same voice when she sang. Julian set the glass down. You've been through hell, losing your brother, taking custody of Max, trying to keep this empire afloat. Don't go chasing ghosts. Adrian stared out the window. What if she's not a ghost? Across the city, Clara sat on her futon, nursing tea from a chipped mug. Her friend Rosa, a nurse from the floor below, was perched cross-legged beside her, sorting through takeout containers. So, let me get this straight, Rosa said, eyes wide. You saved a baby. And the baby's uncle is your ex? Guessed my ex, Clara said softly. He was my everything. He didn't recognize you? Rosa raised an eyebrow. Clara shook her head. I barely recognized myself. And with the uniform, the years, the grief, I'm just a maid to him now. Rosa leaned forward. You could tell him the truth. I can't, Clara whispered. It would unravel too much. He's a CEO now, a guardian. His life has weight. Mine is made of duct tape and night shift. Rosa reached over, squeezing her hand. You don't give yourself enough credit. Before Clara could answer, there was a knock on the door. She opened it to find a hotel courier holding a navy envelope with gold trim. The Zenith logo gleamed on the flap. From Clara Reyes, the man said. From administration. Clara signed for it, her hands trembling as she closed the door. Inside was a crisp invitation. Employee Recognition Night. You are cordially invited to a formal celebration honoring your bravery and excellence in service. Attire. Formal. Host. Clara stared at the page, her stomach flipped. Wow, Rosa said behind her. So he does remember something. Clara didn't answer. She read the letter again. Formal dinner, CEO present, public praise. Adrian Wolf, in a tuxedo, looking into her eyes across a room. Could she handle that? She hadn't worn a dress in 5 years. She hadn't let herself imagine being seen, truly seen, in almost a decade. Her past was a locked room for a reason. I can't go, she whispered. But even as she said it, her fingers traced the gold edges of the invitation. Because part of her wanted to. Wanted to step into that room, not as a ghost, not as a mistake, but as the girl who once believed in forever. Maybe not for him. Maybe just for herself. Clara stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the creases of the deep navy dress Rosa had found at the thrift shop 2 blocks from their apartment. It was elegant, simple, and just barely her size. A single pearl button was missing from the back, and the hem had been carefully mended, but it was beautiful. Rosa had helped pin her hair up and dabbed a touch of mascara on her lashes. You look like someone who belongs in a ballroom, she'd whispered. Clara hadn't believed her. Now, as she stepped into the grand ballroom of the Zenith Hotel, her breath caught in her throat. The chandeliers shimmered above like constellations. Every guest wore black ties, velvet gowns, and conversation like armor. Waiters passed through the crowd with trays of champagne. A string quartet played something soft and expensive in the corner. Clara kept to the wall. No one looked her way. She was just another face, until a sudden hush moved through the room. Adrian Wolf had arrived. He moved through the crowd with ease, all charcoal suit and silver cufflinks. His presence turned heads effortlessly. But his eyes searched. He didn't know what he was looking for until he saw her. Clara stood near the arched window, half-shadowed, holding her clutch like a lifeline. When their eyes met, her entire world narrowed to the space between them. Adrian's breath caught. She turned quickly, trying to disappear back into the crowd, but the movement, too familiar. He began walking. Every step felt like peeling back years. Her hair was different, her dress second-hand, but something inside him refused to question it. Clara made it halfway across the ballroom before a waiter passed too closely. A tray of champagne glasses tipped. The silver clattered. Guests gasped. Without hesitation, Clara moved, not away, but toward Adrian, her arm extending across his chest to shield him, just like she used to when they crossed busy streets as teens. He froze. A gesture? Only one person in his life had ever done that. Clara, he whispered. Her hand dropped. She looked at him, lips trembling. I'm sorry, I think you... It's you, he said, voice shaking. Her denial dissolved into silence. I thought I lost you, he murmured. She couldn't breathe, her vision blurred. I have to go, she whispered. Clara, wait. But she was already slipping through the guests, her heels echoing across the polished floor. Adrian stood in the center of the room, heart pounding like a man who had just seen a ghost walk away again. The alley behind the Zenith was lit only by a single security lamp, casting long shadows on the damp pavement. Clara leaned against the brick wall, the cold biting through the thin fabric of her dress. She clutched her chest, trying to hold herself together. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks, her hands trembled. Why had she come? She should have thrown the invitation away. She should have stayed invisible, safe in her uniform, hidden in back hallways and broom closets. She should have never let herself believe that a second-hand dress and a brave face could undo 10 years of it. But most of all, she should have never looked into his eyes. He had known. Not from her name, not from her face, but from the part of her that never stopped loving him. Her fingers pressed against her heart, aching. He had looked older, sharper. There were lines around his eyes now and a sadness he hadn't carried at 17. But his voice still found her, like it remembered every promise ever made. It's you, he'd said. And it had broken her. The alley door creaked open behind her, but she didn't turn. A bellhop stepped out for a cigarette and paused when he saw her. You okay, miss? She nodded, wiping her tears quickly. Just needed air. He gave a polite nod and disappeared into the quiet. She exhaled, trembling. Above her, in the ballroom, the music continued. Applause echoed faintly from the windows, as if the rest of the world had no idea someone was falling apart beneath them. She slid down to sit on the ground, careful not to tear the hem of the borrowed dress. Her knees drew up to her chest. She had told herself he wouldn't recognize her, that too much time had passed. But the way he'd said her name, she hadn't heard it like that in years. She closed her eyes and whispered to the night, I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. But the stars didn't answer, only the hum of city noise in the distance. She knew she couldn't hide again, not completely. Not now that he'd seen her. But how do you explain a decade of silence? How do you walk back into someone's world after vanishing without a trace? She didn't know. She only knew her heart still beat faster at the sound of his voice, and that terrified her more than anything. The rooftop of the Zenith Hotel was quiet that night. The city stretched below in 1,000 golden pinpricks, each window and headlight a story of its own. Clara leaned against the stone ledge, arms folded, the wind brushing loose strands of hair across her face. She hadn't meant to come up here, but her feet had led her away from the crowd, away from him. She wasn't ready. And yet, part of her wished he would follow. The door opened softly behind her. She didn't turn. I figured I'd find you here, Adrian said gently, his voice carrying through the air like memory. She closed her eyes. He walked closer, each step quiet but sure. He stopped a few feet away. You always loved rooftops, said they made you feel like the world couldn't swallow you. Clara let out a breath. Maybe I just wanted to feel closer to the stars. There was a silence. Then he asked, why did you leave? Her shoulders tensed. She didn't answer immediately. The wind picked up, and the sounds of traffic far below filled the pause. And for a moment, Dean felt a need to... He moved beside her now, careful not to crowd her. The crash? She nodded. My sister died, and your parents, your father especially, he blamed me. Said I was reckless. Said I ruined your chance at college, at a future. Adrian's jaw clenched. I never knew they said that to you. Clara looked at him, her eyes full of the weight she'd carried alone. I overheard it the day of her funeral. Your dad told someone I was a liability. that I'd drag you down. I couldn't bear the thought of being the reason you lost everything." He turned fully to face her. "Clara, I lost everything the day you disappeared." She blinked back tears. "I thought if I left, you could move on. Go to that Ivy League school. Build the life you were meant for. I didn't care about any of that without you." His voice cracked. "I searched for you, for years. Every city, every lead. I kept thinking maybe you were somewhere, waiting." Clara's hand curled tightly against the ledge. I was just too scared to be found." Adrian stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Why now? Why stay? In the same city, in the same building I own." "I didn't know," she whispered. "I took the job because it was steady work. I needed it. I didn't expect." Her voice faltered. "I didn't expect to see you again, especially not holding a baby." Adrian's expression softened. "That's my niece, Ava. My brother passed away 2 years ago. I'm her guardian now." Clara's heart ached. "She's lucky to have you." "You calmed her like you'd known her forever," he said quietly. "You sang to her like you used to sing to me." Clara's lips trembled. "I never forgot any of it, Adrian. Not your voice, not your laugh, not how it felt when you held my hand in the dark." He stepped even closer. "Then why are you still running?" She looked down. "Because I'm not the girl you remember. I'm just a maid now. I clean floors and scrub mirrors. You're this powerful man in a suit. You're the kind of person who belongs on a stage, and I'm the one behind the curtain making sure it's..." Adrian shook his head. "Titles don't scare me. Losing you again does." Her breath caught. "I don't care where you work or what uniform you wear. I care that you're here. That you're still the same girl who sings lullabies in elevators and protects people without thinking." "Twice." Clara's eyes filled. "You say that now, but the world you live in, it's sharp, it has rules, expectations. I don't know if I can survive in it again." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then we'll build something else. Something just for us. No stages, no suits, no pretending." She stared at him, her heart warred between hope and fear. He smiled faintly. "Stay, please." Clara turned away. Her chest burned. The pain of the past, the weight of the years, the possibility of a future, it was all too much. "Hence," she whispered. She started walking toward the door. Adrian didn't follow. But just before she slipped through it, she looked back. One last glance. The rooftop behind her shimmered with the glow of city lights, and the man who had once been her everything, and maybe still was. Her heart ached with every step, but it beat louder with something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Clara stood frozen in the hallway outside the hotel's newly opened daycare center. Her shift assignment for the week had changed. Just like that. No explanation. One minute she was restocking linens on the 11th floor. The next, she was holding a clipboard and being ushered through pastel-colored doors filled with soft lullabies and toddler laughter. She expected to feel out of place, but something about the small space, the gentle hum of lullabies, the scent of baby powder, the mural of stars and clouds softened her chest. And then she saw him. Mac, the baby from the elevator, Adrian's nephew. He was sitting quietly on a cushioned mat, clutching a plush dinosaur as big as his torso. His eyes lit up the moment they met hers. Clara bent down slowly. "Hola, pequeño. Remember me?" Max cooed and reached toward her, his chubby fingers brushing her wrist. It was as if the world paused for a breath. A wave of warmth settled in her spine. The other caregivers introduced her to the children and routines, but Max quickly claimed her as his own. During Max's time, Clara rubbed his back in slow circles. During snack breaks, she coaxed giggles from him with silly animal sounds. And when the other children grew restless, she calmed the room with quiet Spanish lullabies. On Thursday afternoon, Clara brought in a sketch pad. She crouched beside Max's mat and began drawing soft, curvy lines with a crayon. Max babbled as she sketched a tiny star, then a moon, then a little boy on a hill. She handed him a yellow crayon and helped guide his hand. He squealed with glee. Behind the observation glass, unseen to her, Adrian stood still. He had come to check on the center's renovations, but the moment he glimpsed her through the window, sitting on the floor in her uniform, a sleeping Max tucked against her side as she sketched dreams onto paper, his heart clenched. Julian joined him silently, holding a file. "You're supposed to be on a call with Zurich." Adrian didn't move. "I've never seen Max that peaceful." Julian sighed. "She's good with him." Adrian pressed his hand against the glass. "She didn't just save him, Julian. She's healing something I didn't even realize was broken." Julian tilted his head. "And what happens when the board finds out? They already think you're too emotional after taking custody. Now you want to date a hotel maid?" Adrian turned to him, voice quiet but firm. "I don't care about the board." Julian didn't argue. He simply handed over the file and walked away. Inside the daycare, Clara looked up for a moment. She thought she felt something, someone, but the glass was empty. Later that afternoon, as she cleaned up crayons and stacked picture books, she found a folded note tucked under Max's nap blanket. Just 2 words, written in careful script. "Lunch?" Clara stared at it for a full minute. Her fingers trembled. She tucked the note into her apron and whispered, Corazon, what are you doing to me?" Clara sat on the small bench outside the daycare, the note still warm in her palm. Her shift was over, but the question it carried echoed in her chest, louder than any footsteps down the hallway. "Lunch?" It wasn't just about food. It was an invitation to remember, to reopen a door she had once slammed shut with trembling hands and tear-stained cheeks. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she went home, made arroz con leche with cinnamon, and placed Max's crayon drawing on her fridge. A crooked star. A heart with too many lines. She'd helped him draw it, but somehow it still felt like his. By the next day, she was back at the daycare, unable to stay away from the soft way Max curled into her arms during lullabies. But at noon, as the sun poured golden light across the tiled floor, a knock came on the open door. Adrian, in a slate gray suit, sleeves rolled up, 2 coffees in hand. Clara stood still as he approached, heart thudding against her ribs. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said softly, "but I hoped you'd still be here." She didn't speak, just looked at him. There was sadness in his eyes, yet, but also something else. Hope. He handed her one of the cups. "Cinnamon latte. Rosa said it's your favorite." Clara smiled despite herself. "She's a traitor." "She's a romantic," he said. They sat at the children's table in tiny chairs, knees bumping under the surface. He looked around. "You're good with him." "Help children," Clara said, her voice quieter. "I always wanted to teach art, or maybe open a little studio." Adrian looked down at his coffee. "You should." Clara glanced at him. "I don't belong in your world, Adrian." "It's not true. You're a CEO with board meetings and stocks in tailored suits. I'm a maid in borrowed shoes. You're the girl who sang to Max when no one else moved, who held my heart before I even knew what it meant." Clara blinked hard. "But you disappeared," he whispered, "and I thought I lost you forever." "To protect you," she replied. "Your family, they blamed me for the crash." Adrian's jaw tightened. They were wrong. "I didn't want your name dragged through my pain." Adrian leaned forward. "Clara, you were never a burden. You were my peace." She looked away, overwhelmed. He gently reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a crumpled photo, worn at the edges. Her and Adrian, 17, smiling on a summer pier. Claire's breath caught. "I carried it every time I moved," he said, "because I couldn't forget you." Tears slid down her cheeks before she could stop them. Adrian reached for her hand. "Let me take you to lunch," he said. "Not as a CEO, not as a man who owes you anything, just as someone who still remembers the way you laughed at my awful piano playing." Clara laughed, tears and joy tangled together. "I'll come," she whispered, "but no boardrooms. Feel." From the window, baby Max gurgled in his crib, tiny fingers twitching, like he already knew something had changed. Outside, the clouds parted just enough for light to find its way in. The garden behind the Zenith Hotel was usually reserved for guests, an oasis tucked between skyscrapers and noise. But that afternoon, under a quiet patch of ivy and glass, Clara stood in the sunlight with her fingers laced in front of her, heart beating like a drum. Adrian arrived with a small white box in his hand. She tried to speak, but he shook his head gently and extended it to her without a word. Clara opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was the silver locket. Worn and dulled by time, its hinge slightly loose but unmistakable. It was the one she had given him on their last summer together, back when love had been new and untouched by grief. "Thought it was lost," she whispered. "I kept it," Adrian said, voice low. "After the crash, your things were gone, your family moved, your number changed, but this stayed with me." Clara stared at the locket, the initials scratched faintly into the back. C+A. Childish etching, but sacred. "I didn't deserve you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "After what happened, after your father blamed me." "You were a child, Clara," Adrian said, "and you were grieving. I was too. But I never once blamed you. Not then, not now." She looked up at him, tears spilling before she could stop them. "I ran because I thought I had to." "Leave too," he said gently. "But I understand why you did." Clara's shoulders shook. Adrian reached out and touched her arm, and this time she didn't flinch. She stepped forward, locket clutched in her palm, and let her head rest against his chest. "You're the only thing that ever felt real," he murmured. They stood in the sun-dappled silence, hearts remembering. Then, softly, their lips met. The kiss wasn't grand or cinematic. It was careful, fragile as something being unwrapped after years in hiding. Clara's breath hitched as their foreheads touched. But just as quickly, she pulled away. "I'm scared," she said. "She knows. Talk. They already are." Adrian nodded. Then, let them talk. Later that week, the whispers began in earnest. Staff members eyed Clara differently. A few turned cold. Others just watched with curious distance. A love story inside a penthouse drama. The Maid and the Mogul. Rumors spread like wildfire. Clara tried to ignore them, focusing on Max, on lullabies, on clean nap stations and brightly colored blocks. But then came the call. She was pulled aside by a hotel director and informed her assignment at the daycare had ended. No reason was given, just a polite notice of reassignment and a thinly veiled warning. "Board is aware of your situation," the director had said, choosing each word like glass. Clara had nodded silently, hands folded, throat burning. Later that night, Adrian stormed into the boardroom. 10 suited executives sat with their lips tight and judgments heavy. "I'm not here to ask permission," he began. "I'm here to tell you something." They blinked in quiet surprise. "We know, there's concern about appearances," he said, pacing. "That some of you think love makes a man weak, that feelings are distractions, that titles matter more than truth." A woman in gray interrupted. "Mr. Wolf, we simply want to ensure the integrity of the brand." "The brand can't make room for integrity of heart," Adrian said, cutting in. "Then it doesn't deserve to stand." There was silence. "I love her," he continued. "And if that costs me my position, then I'll walk away with my name intact and my heart still beating." The room stayed quiet long after he left. Clara didn't hear about Adrian's speech until the next morning. She was in the staff locker room folding her uniform when Rosa burst in, cheeks flushed, eyes wide. "You need to sit down," Rosa said, waving her phone. Clara looked up, puzzled. "What's going on?" "Adrian. The board meeting. He told them all he said he loved you, and he didn't care what it cost." Clara blinked. "What?" She stood in front of the entire board and basically told them to fire him if they couldn't accept his love for you. Clara sat down slowly on the bench, her folded apron slipping from her lap. The walls of the room seemed to pulse with sound, beating like a second heart in her chest. He did that? Rosa nodded. He meant every word. Clara's first instinct was disbelief. Then came something worse. Guilt. She stood quickly and grabbed her things. "Stop this," she whispered. "He can't lose everything because of me." "Clara." "To make it right," she said, her voice trembling. She ran through the corridors, past elevators and polished marble floors, past tourists snapping photos and businessmen arguing on their phones. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she reached the HR office. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to submit my resignation," Clara said, barely recognizing her own voice. She was handed a form. Her hands shook as she filled it out, her name scrawled in rushed ink. She placed the envelope on the desk and turned to leave. But just outside the office, Adrian was waiting. His tie was loose, his hair ruffled by wind or frustration. When he saw the resignation slip in her hand, his eyes darkened. He said simply, "I heard what you did," Clara replied, "and I can't let you risk everything for me." "You're not a risk," he said, stepping closer. "You're the reason any of this matters." She swallowed hard. "Your name, your company, your reputation. None of it matters without you," he said. "They can take my title, my office, the corner suite on the top floor, but they can't make me pretend I don't love you." Clara's lip quivered. "I never wanted to ruin anything." "You didn't ruin anything," Adrian said. "You brought it back to life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the locket again. "This stayed with me for 10 years, he said. "I don't want to lose you for 10 more. She stared at him, eyes brimming. "You once told me you didn't deserve me," he said softly. "But I think I never deserved you. Not until now." Silence wrapped around them like snowfall. "I can't promise the world will be kind," he continued, "but I can promise I will be." Clara looked at the resignation letter, crumpled in her fingers. Then she let it fall to the floor. "I don't want to walk away again," she whispered. Adrian took her hand gently, threading his fingers through hers. "Then don't." In that quiet hallway, under the glow of morning light, Clara leaned into him, into the man who had waited, searched, and finally found her again. Outside the glass windows, the city kept moving. But inside, something rare had paused. Love, long buried beneath years of pain and silence, had risen again. Not with noise, but with truth. And the woman who once thought she had no place in his world finally began to believe she did. The resignation letter trembled in Clara's hand as she stepped into the quiet morning hallway of the Zenith Hotel. Her heart felt heavy, but she'd made up her mind. If staying meant jeopardizing Adrian's reputation and career, then leaving was the only way to protect him. As she turned the corner toward the HR office, the soft sound of baby laughter pulled her attention. Clara froze. A chubby figure in footy pajamas was crawling rapidly across the polished lobby floor, straight toward her. "Mama?" Max squealed. Her eyes widened. She looked around, startled. No one else was in sight. She dropped to her knees, instinctively, scooping Max into her arms. His little hands clutched at her sweater. "Mama," he said again, more softly this time, burying his face into her neck. She pressed her cheek to his warm head, stunned, heart aching. "No, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm not your mama. I'm just Clara." But before she could put him down, a deep voice echoed from behind her. "Clara?" Adrian stood there, briefcase in hand, eyes wide, his gaze dropped to Max in her arms. Clara rose slowly, clutching the child protectively. He ran toward me," she said quickly, flustered. "I didn't mean to call to you, Mama," Adrian said, stepping forward. His voice was not accusatory, just confused. "Why would he?" Clara hesitated. Her fingers brushed Max's back as she steadied herself. "I wasn't going to tell you like this," she said softly, "but I think it's time." She reached into her satchel and pulled out an old envelope, worn at the edges but carefully preserved. She handed it to him. Adrian opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten letter, ink slightly smudged. Clara, if anything happens to me, promise me this. Stay close to Max, raise him with love, even if Adrian doesn't know, even if it's hard. I trust you more than anyone. You're his family now too. Adrian's fingers trembled as he read the familiar handwriting. His sister's voice felt like it was reaching through time and space, shaking him from the inside. Clara's voice broke the silence. She wrote it the week before the accident. I tried to stay away, Adrian. I didn't want to interfere, but when I saw Max at the hotel, I couldn't ignore him. He's all she had left. Adrian stared at her, struggling to steady his breath. These months, he said, voice low. You were near, and I never knew. But there was a hint of pain in her voice as she said these words. You had your own world. I thought, after everything, I was just someone from your past, someone you didn't need anymore. Adrian stepped closer, eyes glassy. You were never just someone, he said. You were my everything. Max reached up, patting Adrian's cheek with a giggle. You were hers, Clara whispered. Ella loved you so much, Adrian. She knew you'd raise Max with everything you had. He blinked, tears finally falling. And she trusted you, more than anyone. At the store to admire his brother. I said, Clara, stay close, Clara said. And I did. I kept my head down. I didn't want anyone to think I was clinging to your name or... Adrian shook his head, cutting her off. You carried all of this alone. I thought it was the only way, she whispered. Max, still in her arms, yawned and nuzzled into her chest. Adrian stared at the picture they made, the woman who once held his heart, and the child, who now linked them to everything they had lost and everything they might still have. And then he said it. Marry me? Clara's eyes flew open. She braced. He stepped forward, not grand, not showy, just sincere. Of you. Because of Max, not because of Ella's letter, but because I don't want to spend another day searching for something that's been right in front of me. I love you, Clara. I never stopped. Clara blinked, stunned. You are not just anything, he said. You are the woman who risked everything, who loved in silence, who stayed when it hurt. She looked down at Max. His tiny hand held her necklace now, playing with it. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered. We'll figure it out together, Adrian replied. Clara looked at him, really looked at him. Her past, her pain, her home, her hope. A minute, she said. He nodded. She turned away, holding Max close, her heart racing with the weight of a question that could rewrite everything. Clara stood in the hallway just outside the lobby, Max still in her arms, her breath unsteady. She hadn't said yes. She hadn't said no. Her heart thudded in her chest like it was knocking for freedom. The letter, the proposal, the word mama, it was too much, too fast, too full of ghosts and truths and dreams she'd buried long ago. She turned and paced toward the back of the hotel, the early light filtering through the tall windows, brushing her skin like a promise. Max had drifted into a peaceful doze, his breath warm against her collarbone. That alone gave her the strength to keep walking, not away, but toward the quiet. She sat on a bench in the Rose courtyard, tucked between the conference wing and the East Tower. Years ago, this place had been her favorite. She'd hidden here once, after Adrian kissed her for the first time beneath the blooming magnolia tree. She looked down at Max and whispered, "You really broke the rules today, little guy." Footsteps crunched on gravel. She turned. Adrian stood a few paces away, not too close, giving her space. "I'm not here to push you," he said softly. "I just needed to be near." She nodded. "I didn't come here to fall into this. I came to work, to disappear. And now you've become the center," he said, finishing her sentence with quiet awe. Clara smiled, eyes damp. "Do you even realize how many nights I dreamed of this moment? Not the hotel, not the suits or title, but you. Just seeing you, knowing you were okay." Adrian's voice cracked. "I was never okay without you." Max stirred, eyes fluttering open. Clara rocked him gently. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of you, but of what this means. If we do this, if we make this leap, it's not just about us anymore." "It never was," Adrian said. "It's always been about love, about family, about promises." Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out the resignation letter. She held it for a long moment, then tore it in half, then again, until the pieces fluttered to the ground like confetti in the morning breeze. Adrian stepped forward. "Does that mean?" "It means I'm staying," she said, eyes locked with his. "But not for the job, not even for Max. I'm staying for the chance to choose you. Freely, fully." Adrian exhaled like he'd been underwater. "I don't need a ballroom proposal," she said. "I just need one thing." "Name it." She reached up, brushing a tear from his cheek. "No more vanishing, no more guilt, just truth." He covered her hand with his. "Then here's mine. I love you. Not the version I imagined, not the memory, but the real Clara. The one who sings lullabies in 2 languages and walks away when the cost is too high." Max reached between them with a sleepy yawn and patted both their hands. Clara laughed through her tears. "He's not subtle." Adrian chuckled. "He gets it from you." They stood there in the courtyard, 3 pieces slowly forming a whole. No titles, no brogue past too broken. Just a man, a woman, and the child that brought them back together. And as the sun climbed higher over the city skyline, Clara whispered, "Let's go home." The grand ballroom of the Zenith Hotel shimmered with gold and silver under chandeliers that rained light like stars. A year had passed, and once again, the hotel hosted its annual gala, a night of elegance, recognition, and renewal. This time, however, Clara wasn't weaving between guests with a tray of glasses or smoothing linen on buffet tables. She entered through the main entrance, arm in arm with a small boy in a bow tie and suspenders. "You look fancy enough, Mama Clara," Evan asked, tugging nervously at his collar. Clara knelt and adjusted his bow tie, her eyes glowing. "You look like royalty," she said softly. "Ella would have cried if she saw you tonight." He smiled wide, then took her hand proudly as they stepped further into the sea of tuxedos and gowns. Guests turned, many recognizing her face from recent features in community magazines and the hotel's new outreach brochures. Some offered warm nods. A few clapped quietly. Clara, now creative director of the Zenith's community outreach program, had launched after-school art projects, shelter, partnerships, and educational events, all from a studio office she once dreamed of just passing by. At the edge of the ballroom, standing tall in a perfectly cut suit, was Adrian Wolfe. He looked at her with a gaze full of memory and reverence. His eyes held the ache of the past and the pride of the present. When she approached, he extended his hand with a playful smile. "Still afraid of elevators?" he asked, voice low, meant just for her. "Only the broken ones," Clara laughed, slipping her hand into his. He drew her into a slow dance, one hand around her waist, the other clasping hers tightly. They moved gently, swaying in rhythm, not just to the soft music, but to the life they'd built, one that had grown from broken beginnings. Around them, the world blurred, conversations faded. Only the music remained, soft piano notes and distant clinks of champagne flutes, and the warmth of Adrian's hand, steady and sure. "I never thought I'd see this day," Clara whispered as they danced. He pulled her closer. "I did," he replied. "Maybe not this exact way, but I always knew, if I found you again, I'd never let go." Evan, from the side of the ballroom, waved excitedly at them, then ran to join other kids near the dessert table. He had grown so much in just 1 year. He now called Clara Mama Clara without hesitation or confusion, and each time she heard it, her heart folded a little more into place. Later in the evening, Clara stepped away from the gala, walking quietly up to the executive floor. She reached Adrian's office, no longer a place she feared or tiptoed past. Now it felt like part of her own life. She paused outside the door. Her eyes scanned the polished gold plate beside it. It no longer read just, "A dream of you." Now, mounted proudly below his name, was a second door plate. "Clara Wolfe, co-chair, Wolf Family Foundation. She touched it gently, her fingers tracing the letters as if grounding herself in their reality. Not because of prestige, but because it was hers, a symbol of everything they had reclaimed. Behind her, the elevator dinged. She turned, her breath catching. A young hotel worker, no older than she'd once been, stepped out with towels in hand. He smiled politely, not recognizing her. "Mrs. Wolf," he greeted with a slight bow before moving along. "Mrs. Wolf, are you familiar with the Phelan lawsuits?" The name still struck her like a whispered vow. Adrian appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers once more. "You okay?" he asked. Clara nodded. "I was just thinking about how much has changed, about how much I've changed." He kissed her temple gently. "You didn't change, you just came home to yourself." They walked back down the hallway together, hand in hand, as if retracing a path once lost. Each step felt symbolic, past silence, giving way to presence, heartbreak becoming belonging. When they returned to the ballroom, the gala was in full bloom. Evan had gathered 3 other children and was teaching them how to dance like a dinosaur, swaying stiffly and roaring between giggles. Clara laughed from across the room. "Should we stop him?" Adrian asked, amused. "Noise," she replied, eyes twinkling. "That's the best part of tonight." The gala's host took the stage and cleared his throat. "Tonight," he announced, "we celebrate not only those who lead this hotel, but those who carry its heart." He turned toward Adrian and Clara. "Mr. and Mrs. Wolf, would you join us?" They exchanged a glance before walking up together. The crowd clapped, warmly. "Any of you know," the host continued, "Clara Wolf has not only revitalized our community outreach, but reminded us all what resilience, dignity, and compassion look like in real time." Clara's cheeks colored. She hadn't expected attention, not like this. Adrian leaned toward her, whispering, "You deserve every second of this." She stepped forward to the microphone. For a moment, her voice caught in her throat, but when she saw Evan beaming at her from the edge of the crowd, courage filled her chest. "I came to this hotel years ago thinking I'd stay invisible," she began, "but somewhere between floor tiles and laundry carts, I found people who saw me, and one man who never stopped." Adrian took her hand again, his grip saying what words could not. She smiled and continued, "I believe that no role, maid or manager, defines your worth. What defines you is what you give to others, especially when no one's looking." The room fell into respectful silence. "Thank you," she finished softly, "for letting me be seen." They stepped down together, and Evan sprinted into her arms as soon as she reached the floor. "You were the best speaker ever," he said, throwing his arms around her waist. Clara laughed through happy tears. "Thank you, my love." The rest of the night passed in moments Clara would never forget. Dancing again in Adrian's arms, receiving small nods of respect from guests who once overlooked her, and watching Evan steal 3 desserts and claim he was saving them for tomorrow. When the night ended, the 3 of them stepped into the elevator together. Clara stared at the panel of buttons and then up at the mirrored ceiling. So many memories had started in this box, some painful, some life-changing. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Still brave?" She nodded. "Still me." The elevator doors closed. But this time, they weren't trapped. They were rising. Up, toward the penthouse, toward the office with 2 nameplates, toward a future stitched together from grief, love, and second chances. When the doors opened, the city skyline greeted them. Evan pointed, eyes wide. "It looks like stars are dancing." Adrian said, pulling Clara close, "just like us." And beneath the lights, the woman who once scrubbed guest suites stood tall beside the man who once lost her, and the boy who called her home. There were no more titles to chase, no past left to outrun. Just a family, built not by name, but by love, and a doorplate that told the truth at last. Clara Wolf Co-Chair, Family Foundation. Next to it, the elevator blinked softly. Still working, still rising, just like her. Forever. Sometimes, life changes in the quietest, most unexpected moments, not through grand gestures or dramatic turns, but in something as simple as comforting a crying child. That's what makes this story so powerful. It reminds us that the greatest acts of love often begin with small choices, a pause, a glance, a decision to care. In this story, a powerful millionaire CEO stops everything at a glamorous wedding to kneel beside a child who's clearly overwhelmed and heartbroken. In a world where wealth and status usually demand attention, this man chooses something different. Kindness. That simple act of compassion becomes the thread that weaves this entire emotional journey together. The moment he sees the child's mother, everything shifts. It's no longer just about a crying child, it's about rediscovering something long lost. A woman who, like so many others, has been through hardship, who carries quiet strength, and who doesn't wear her pain on her sleeve but in her eyes. She's not someone who begs for attention. She's someone who's learned to live without What makes this story unforgettable is that it's not just about romance. It's about recognition. Seeing someone, truly seeing them, not for their role, their title, or their flaws, but for their heart. The CEO didn't just see a mother. He saw a woman who had carried life's burdens with grace, who had loved without asking for anything in return, and who had probably gone unnoticed for far too long. From that encounter, we're reminded of a beautiful truth. Character matters more than circumstance. This woman didn't have wealth, connections, or luxury, but what she had was integrity, tenderness, and quiet resilience. And that was more powerful than any designer suit or business title in the room. This story teaches us a powerful life lesson. Never underestimate the impact of a single act of kindness. We often believe that in order to make a difference, we need to do something huge. But sometimes a gentle gesture, like wiping away a tear or kneeling to listen, is what truly changes someone's life. Another message that resonates deeply is this: we are all worthy of love, even when we don't feel like it. The mother in this story likely never expected to be noticed, much less loved by someone like him. Yet, that's the beauty of authentic connection. It doesn't follow rules, status, or logic. It follows truth. And when someone sees your truth, your goodness, your strength, your sacrifices, that's when love becomes real. This is not just a love story. It's a reflection of something greater: hope. Hope that even in a world full of judgment and superficiality, there are still people who value heart over appearance, kindness over image, and presence over performance. It also encourages a beautiful life ideal. Be kind, even when no one's watching. Listen, even when it's easier to walk away. Love, even when it feels scary. The millionaire in this story didn't show compassion because it was expected of him. He did it because, somewhere beneath all the power and privilege, he remembered what it meant to be human. The child's tears opened a door, not just to his mother, but to a deeper understanding of what truly matters in life. Love is not always found in perfect timing or flawless moments. Sometimes it arrives through mistakes, interruptions, and unexpected tears. And when it does, it's often the kind of love that lasts. For those who've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unloved, this story is a gentle reminder. You are not invisible. Your kindness matters. And sometimes the world sees your light at exactly the moment you think no one ever will. In the end, this story shows us that even the richest lives are incomplete without connection, without softness, without love. And maybe, just maybe, the person who changes your life isn't the one you were looking for, but the one who showed up when your child cried.